Okay, well, firstly, welcome, Christina. Lovely to catch up with you. And welcome everybody else who's come into this LinkedIn Live author interview with Christina Gerakiteys, who's written a book called Celebrating Success, One Failure at a Time. So we're going to have a lovely kind of half-hour discussion about Christina's book journey. So Christina, thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Jaqui, thank you on so many levels for inviting me onto the podcast, for being part of the book, for helping me as in your title as book advisor. So many layers of thanks to you as well.
Oh, the absolute pleasure. So I'm going to get straight into it. So for those of you who don't know Christina, Christina is a serial entrepreneur and has spent most of her working life focused on innovating and creating possibilities for other entrepreneurs and organisations to reassess their definitions of innovation, success, and failure. And way before failing fast became a trendy phrase for startups. Over the past 30 years, she has run a music festival for 10 years, provided experiential education to 60 music businesses, technology students, directed TV shows, commercials, documentaries and events, played in bands, and much more. Nowadays, Christina is CEO of Utopia X and is on a mission, and I love this, to enable the enablers and to empower and inspire leaders and emerging leaders to converge minds, technology fields to have maximum impact. And given what's happening around GPT, Christina, you're right in the thick of it. Today, we're having a discussion on Christina's book that she recently launched. When was that? In February or March?
I think it might have been March we launched the book.
March? Gosh,
it feels like a long time ago.
It feels like a long time ago. Celebrating Success, One Failure at a Time. She's going to talk to us about why she chose to write and self-publish it, what worked and what didn't, and what she has learned going through the process. So thank you again, Christina, for your time. Now, before we get into your book experience, what are you currently working on?
Funnily enough, I'm working on Celebrating Success, One Failure at a Time. So it's actually become quite a topic for conversation. So I've just returned from Silicon Valley, where I gave a talk that was all about celebrating success, one failure at a time. And failure, for a number of reasons over there, has become quite a popular topic for conversation, redefining what failure is, particularly in startup land, because the appetite for startups has been, kind of on this wave up and down, depending on what's happening in the stock market, depending on what's happening with ChatGPT, depending on what's happening with pandemic. So it's riding its own incredible wave at the moment. I think everything is riding a wave. And the fact that we are now talking about success and failure is giving people the courage to move forward and look at failure more as what it is. It's a learning. One of the thing that I like to say to people the most is, imagine if you failed at your first attempt at walking. The jean companies would be super rich now because we'd be needing, a new pair of jeans every week because we'd be walking on our backsides. So it's quite topical. It's quite a conversation that needs to be talked about, particularly in organizations, because we've had this fail fast, fail and learn, all the rhetoric that's been around. And I do believe that we're at tipping point now where people are starting to walk the talk on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we'll get to this a bit later on, because when we were talking about the book and you asked me to be interviewed for it, I had a fear around failure, there you go. So I think you've made a really good point that having the two together, I think, is a really, really interesting thing. Now, what was your motivating factor to write and then publish the book? Because you've been in and around the space for a long time.
Yeah, so I think because I'd met, I met Jane Huxley. I'd had Jane Huxley speak at an event for me quite some time ago. So that was like a catalyst for it. I'd been on a panel with Nick Bowditch, and we had spoken around education. But further to that, he does a lot of work with mental health because now he's an advocate for mental health because it's been one of the things that he's had to deal with. The Graham sisters, I had been not a professional consultant for them, but I had done some work with them and had conversations and introduced them to people around their startup and listening to the stories about how many times they had to revisit the website and the reaction that people had to them when they went to a tech event in Singapore. I think Jen Holland is one of my favorite stories, and it is in the book, when she came second in a competition in New York City for innovators. And she rang me and she said, "Oh my God, I didn't come first. I'm devastated." And I said, "Are you listening to what you're saying? You came second in New York City. That's amazing. Like that's such a success." So I think because of all these conversations that I've been having with people and working with startups and working on programs, I co-wrote an innovation program with a colleague, and we delivered it. It was called the Rippler Innovation Effect, and we had lots of startups in the room. So I think that was they were all part of the motivation. So I'm collecting all these stories and, randomly say to people, "Hey, would you do an interview? I'm going to write this book, Celebrating Success One Failure at a Time." And everyone said yes. Everybody that I asked said yes. So that was pretty motivating.
Yeah, I bet. And just before I go on, if anyone listening in, you want to write in some comments, Donna's working in the background, so I'll see the comments come through. So please drop comments or questions in, and we will get to them. So Christina, given that bit of background, how long did it actually take you to write and publish your book?
So it took a long time, and that's part of the Celebrating Success and Failure story that we tell in the book. It took 7 years. So it was almost like it was, wasn't it? It was that 7-year itch that actually had to push it out there into the arena and see how it would be received. But it was a series of procrastinations, like, oh, do I really want to do this? Oh, is it going to be good enough? Oh, will people like it? So many things around that topic that was quite incredible.
You've got a puppy in the background. He's happy for your success. So what was that got you off the procrastination and thinking, "Oh, I've got to do this now"?
Funnily enough, it may have been meeting you, Jaqui. I've had a series of goes at it, and eventually, like, I'd written to people so many times and said, "Hey, can you just give me an update where we're actually closer with the book?" And my editor, the amazing Claire Williams, I'd had so many meetings. Every time I got enthused and wanted to revisit the book, Claire, I'd go, "Claire, we need to have a meeting. We need to take it the next step. I need you to fix up another chapter for me," whatever. So it was a series of steps that led towards that. You've really got to get this finished. And then I think I just made a commitment to myself mid last year, that went, okay, you either do it or you give up on it. And giving up on it wasn't an option. So I had to do it. And then you just helped me push it that extra bit.
There you go. And it was a good, fun project. Did you have a clear purpose and goal for your book when you started?
Yes, I did, actually. So it was to help as many people as possible overcome, because I'd spoken to so many people around how they felt like failures, particularly people that were coming into this innovation program that we wrote and that we delivered. So it was a series, but it was a 6-week program. So by the time people got to week 3 or 4, they were really opening up, and we were really sharing some deep insights around a whole lot of things. And I think I realized that people needed permission to fail. And at that point in time, I was just saying to people that I was working with, you got 5 minutes in the fetal position, and that's it. After 5 minutes in the fetal position on the floor, you can bash, scream, cry, do whatever you want to do. But after 5 minutes, you have to get up and you have to start all over again, or pick up from where you went off. And even though you feel like you might be 10 steps behind, you're actually not. Look at all the distance that you've come. And that's when I picked up the enthusiasm to interview these people with remarkable stories who I had met and had invited into various events or as I said with Nick, been on stage with, and wanted to say, hey, it's okay because this is what's going to happen, And then I think the other thing that really pushed me was when So Marc Randolph wrote the foreword to the book. So very honoured to have had his input in the book. And I met him. We both were delivering at the Boston Innovation, or not the Boston Innovation. It's called the Front End of Innovation Conference, and it's in Boston. So pre-COVID, I had met Marc, and I had spent, a good hour and a half speaking with him on what had happened between Netflix and Blockbuster and everything. But I think,
Christina, just before you go on, some people might not know who Marc Randolph is.
Okay, sorry. So Nick Randolph is one of the co-founders of Netflix. So he told me the whole story about how they founded, and it's all true. Shoving that little CD, that compact disc into the letterbox to see how fast it would come back is true. The conversations around Blockbuster, from what I've read, most of those are pretty true, according to Marc's version. But the other thing that he said that was quite profound was, I started 7 businesses. Only one of them succeeded. I can't tell you why it succeeded and the other ones failed. But I think, and for me, it was his tenacity. And it was, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. I'm putting everything into this. This is what I've learned. So I think it was that series of failures that led to the success of Netflix.
Interesting. I'm just looking up his book here. He says here in the foreword, that he wrote, you need a tremendous tolerance for risk. You need persistence. And most importantly, you need to be good at coming up with new ideas.
Yep.
Which I think is really interesting.
And that is exactly what Netflix have done. So the other thing that I use Netflix as an example for when we're doing workshops or talks or whatever is Netflix never sat still. They started off as this disc that went in the mail, but then it had to come back to headquarters, and then it would go out again, and they had all these late fees and everything else. So then they went through an iteration where they went, hey, we're going to ditch late fees. And people went, well, you're crazy. People aren't going to return the product if you don't have a late fee. And then they went through this iteration where they said, why are we getting them to send them back to headquarters? Why aren't we then getting, Christina borrows watches a movie that Jaqui wants to watch. We give Christina Jacqui's email address or Jackie's postal address, and Christina posts it straight to Jaqui. And people thought that was crazy, but it worked for them as well, which meant that nothing had to come back to headquarters, which meant they didn't need to have all the space they had. And then, eventually they moved into streaming, and now they've changed their model again. They had, they've just gone through that, the change in subscription model. Everyone said, oh, if they do that, they're going to lose so much. They've actually increased the people
I saw that message come up on my Netflix the other day, actually.
It's interesting. People haven't dropped away. They've dropped. So it was that series of, you can't sit still as an entrepreneur. You can't sit still, and I think that's what appeals to me with the stories of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed in the book, yourself as well. No one sat still. Everybody kept going. Okay, well then what's next? Okay, if that didn't work, what's next? And I think that's a fantastic lesson.
And I guess that segues really well into my next question. What are the 2 or 3 most important aspects of the book for you?
2 or 3. Okay. I think so I'll go with the feedback that I've received around the book as well. It's not personal message from Jane Huxley has been quite powerful. So very simple comment that was made to her by one of her managers many years ago when she was at Microsoft. So she's had several iterations since. And like she started Pandora Music in Australia. She was headhunted to start Pandora Music, which was in opposition to Spotify, and it failed, but now she's running one of the biggest media companies in Australia. So she lives and breathes that celebrating success one failure at a time. But she was in tears in her office, and you'll read about this in the book in her own words, which is much more powerful than what I'm about to tell you. But she was in tears in her office. One of her managers walks in, says, what's wrong? She's crying. She said, oh, I failed. I've done this, I've done that. And he says to her, what did the sign say when you drove in to the car park this morning? And she said, what do you mean? He said, well, the sign that's hanging out the office. And she said Microsoft. Oh, so it didn't say Jane Huxley. Is that, I did. And the message landed on her. So ever since that point, she wrote INP, it's not personal, on every meeting that she was having. And what really struck me in such a nice way was somebody said to me last week or the week before, I've used that on my staff. I've actually said to them, it's not personal. I want you to write it on a piece of paper, So the messages like that, so that really struck me. The inequality between how males and females are treated, particularly in the tech industry, was very one of the main key points in the Graham sisters story. So there's a really interesting tale in there about when they went to a tech conference in Singapore, and I won't tell you what happens, but read the book and find out. That's what I'm meant to be doing, is tell you. But it's really interesting as well. Your story. And I think the thing that I find the most interesting about that, and I don't know if you're going to get to this soon, but now we're getting to it sooner than what we would have. But when I said to you, what's your definition of failure? And you said, I don't have one. I don't believe in failure. And then the whole conversation that happened between us after that. So that was quite profound as well. And then look, all of them, they're just the most remarkable, generous people with their time as well. And Jen Holland's absolute dogmatic determination, and tomorrow's no is or today's no is tomorrow's yes, which was quite a profound statement that she made as well. And I think they're all little pieces of gold that need to be
that's that real persistence piece. And so and I've obviously read the book several times, and I learned a lot and different aspects of it I think are really interesting. Heading back to kind of the whole process of the book, how hard or easy did you find kind of like the production process of the cover design, internal and stuff like that? It's, because people get excited about writing their book, but that's kind of like only one part of several.
Yeah. So the process was easy, Jaqui, when I got you on board and you had every, but what I loved about working with you is you went, I can do this, or you can do this, and then I can pick up here. And then, so that was a lovely process for me. And I'm not getting paid for saying that. Anyone that's listening, that's an absolute truth. Jaqui just makes things so much easier. The cover was very interesting. Yeah. So I have a designer, and I said to her, this is what the book's called. Go for it. Whatever you want to put in the cover, just do it. Anyway, she came back to me with she's an incredible designer. Izzy Lawrence Studio is if you want to look her up on the Instagram or anything, she's an incredible designer. And she came back with just words on colored backgrounds. She said, I have absolutely no idea what you want, and I have no direction, and I don't know what the best way to do this for you is. You need to give me some more direction. That was a lesson for me. So there's me thinking that to give a creative open field, and I should have learnt, because it's happened to me before. I gave an animator absolute carte blanche to do whatever he wanted with an animation, and he said, no, you can't do that to me. He said, I need the guidelines. He said, if I'm going to push outside a box, I need to know where the box sits. And it was like that with Izzy. So then I said to her, okay, this is what I see in my head. I've got this Greek olive leaf because it means victory, and I've got this phoenix because phoenix rising is what the whole book's all about. And she came back with, this was the first attempt at and I just went, I'm totally in love with it, like totally in love with the cover. And we just had to put she made a few, I didn't even say, hey, can you fix that or can you do that? She said, well, I'm going to make a few adjustments, and it's just magic. It works so well for the book. And intuitively she picked orange. And orange is the color of innovation, like you've got on now. I should have worn my orange with match.
My favorite color.
It's the color that depicts innovation. So the fact that she came back with that all over the cover as well, and then I think everything else, the process was being guided by you, and I think we did maybe 4 or 5 edits, and then I had no idea about how to put it into, like, what was the format of the book, and the format of the book's beautiful. And they're things that I have no idea how to do. I know what I like when I see it, and I know what I don't like. But that whole process is something that was completely unknown to me. And the guidance, the guidance that you gave me and everything else just worked. And I think the book's beautiful. It's really,
I think the book's beautiful too. It's got a great cover. You probably can't see it here, but it's got a spot varnish on the cover, so it's actually shiny. It's matte and shiny. It's very nice, very nice. Moving on a bit, again, a lot of people think about writing their book, but they don't give too much thought to the marketing of it. So how much effort or energy did you put into the kind of pre-launch and the launch, and what do you post that?
So I was very grateful to a lot of people around the launch, yourself included. I worked very closely with the crew at Work Club, and they had just opened the Locomotive, and they had said to me, hey, we would love to host the book launch at Locomotive, which was a perfect area for it because it is right in the middle of Innovation Entrepreneur Central. So that was very fitting. And it was wonderful to work with that team around the launch of the book. And then putting the program together so that it wasn't just, hey, here's the book launch, but let's interview the people that are interviewed in the book, yourself included. You know, Catherine Graham, Jen Holland was there, expertly Master of Ceremonies by Paul Gordon, who is another very kind-hearted, amazing author that you know. And so he knew exactly what we'd been through, putting the whole book together. And then having Brad, who's a very close Singularity colleague of mine, we co-deliver workshops, things like that together, do a really lovely acknowledgement of country, and then host the panel, because I'm used to hosting panels. You know, I'm the host of the panel, I'm not on the panel. So that was a really interesting process as well. So putting together the launch was great. If I didn't have you cracking that whip around, just do the post, here's another one, and then very, very grateful to Mel Arbuthnot for pushing and actually writing some of my copy for the marketing and making it easy for me in that regard. They were just moments of magic. And then I think the post the event, I know that you will say you haven't done enough post marketing on it, so I'm very grateful for this podcast and, you know, some other things that have happened, but particularly very grateful for people that have liked the book and then sent it out to a wider audience. So I did a talk with Abundium last week, and they actually purchased the book and gave it to people that were there. And also when I went to Silicon Valley and to give the talk celebrating success one failure at a time, and they purchased the book for their cohort. So I think things like that have worked really nicely. But I can feel it now. I can feel that telepathic message from you going, get marketing.
Well, funny that. And but I think you raise a really interesting thing, is a lot of people get hooked up in trying to sell one book to one person. And as I've said to you and a lot of other people, if you can get bulk sales either before, during and after, that's I mean, you do both, but, you know, selling 50 copies into a presentation or as part of your speaking or into a company, that's a really effective way to get your book out to a wider community. And it's actually in a way more cost effective too, which means if you're self-publishing, you get to keep more of the money, which is of course really important too. Now the different sort of question, what wouldn't you do again? So you probably are going to write another book at one point. Is there anything that you tried that didn't work for you and you say, like, I'm not going to do that again?
Yes, procrastinate. So the next book is called The Upward Spiral Innovation Strategy. And I've already mentioned that to you. So we've written probably half the book at the moment. So I'm not going to procrastinate because...
Okay, so here you go. I'm going to put you on the line here. When are you going to have your first draft finished?
Okay, so I haven't told you this. So this is headline news. You're the first to hear about it. And Jaqui, as my book advisor, has not yet heard about it. I'm going to co-author. I met somebody, one of my colleagues in Silicon Valley has done extremely similar work to what I have in this innovation space. We speak the same language. I was telling her about the book, and she has some remarkable case studies from Google, Microsoft, people that she's worked with in the Valley that will be so beneficial for the book. So I said, hey, do you want to co-author with me? And she said, yes. So we're doing that. So let me say that we will. And so her words to me was, oh, that'll be so good to have somebody I'm accountable to. And I went, oh, it'll be so good for me to have somebody who I'm accountable to. So we're aiming for early next year. We will have the Upward Spiral Innovation Strategy out to market with your assistance, Jaqui.
There you go. So you heard it here first, and I think you now have multiple people accountability. So was there anything surprising about this, I guess, the journey that you thought, I didn't expect that, or I'm surprised about that?
It takes a lot to surprise me, as in to really gobsmack me, if you know what I mean. So I found it all a learning journey is probably the better way for me to put it, rather than did I find anything surprising? Yes, actually, I'll take that back. What I found surprising was my attitude, and still is my attitude to signing the book. Does that, I don't know. So that was very surprising to me, because people went, well, you haven't signed it. And I went, well, I don't sign unless I'm asked to sign it, because I'm not going to make the assumption that everybody wants a signed book. Apparently everybody wants a signed book. So my personal attitudes to part of that journey along the way have been, but as far as the process goes, it was very much learning, and it wasn't, even though there were things I had no idea about that you taught me about, and that I found out along the way. Like, I'd organised events before, so organising a launch wasn't a big deal. Well, it was a big deal, but it wasn't out of my zone. I looked at the whole book as a project, and I had so many wonderful, amazing people around me that helped. So it wasn't surprising as such, but it was a whole learning experience that I really enjoyed. And I think probably my attitude has been the most surprising thing in some things. And that I talk about procrastination and tell people not to do it, and there was me being the major procrastinator. So go figure.
We got through that one. Christina, thank you so much for your insights. I've got a quick quiz just to round off the conversation. I've got a quick quiz that I ask everybody. Are you up for that?
Okay, here we go.
It won't hurt. How do you read? Are you ebook, print book, or audio?
All of the above.
All right, okay. Do you have a preference?
Probably, I love the text style of a book, but I've just downloaded an audio because I'm going away for a little while, and I think I'm going to have a better chance at listening to it while I'm walking, while I'm moving around and things like that. So if I have an absolute choice, it's probably that tactility, because I write all over it.
And also, you've now just published one, of course. Best place for reading: couch, bed, or somewhere else?
So I've got a tiny little balcony that gets lovely sun. So that's my somewhere else, or the beach. I love reading on the beach. Love it.
All right. I don't like getting sand in my books. There you go. Marking up books. Are you a page folder? Do you write in books, or do you use Post-it notes?
So I will dog ear a book, and I will write on the dog ear to say what it is about that page that I like. So there you go.
Wow. Okay. Reading style. Are you read a few, skip a few, or read from beginning to end?
Beginning to end. Even if I don't like the book, I will make sure I finish it. How bad's that?
There you go. Yeah. Now, outside of business and your work, do you read fiction or non-fiction, or a combination?
I'm in a book club intentionally to make me read things that I wouldn't normally read. So I'm very much, if I'm outside of work not reading a business book, if I had a choice, there would probably be more books along the spiritual kind of line, that consciousness, neuroscience, etc. I'm in a book club intentionally to make me read books that I would not normally read. And really loving, so most of those are non-fiction. There's a couple of autobiographies in there, so really enjoying that process.
Oh, great. In relation to sharing books, are you a hoarder or a giver?
No, I'm a giver, and I forget who I've given them to, so I go back and go, oh, I've got a book I can lend you, and then I go back and try and find it on my bookcase, and I can't find it.
Yeah. And interesting, I'm the same too. And there's a couple of books that I have given out and rebought and then given that out. So, I think I've bought the same book 4 times over the last 5 years because I keep giving it away. So I'm the same. Writing style. Are you Oxford English or Australian English or US English? Australian English. There we go.
Actually, no, that's not true. It's more Oxford English, but I definitely will go through and correct. So if the Zs drive me nuts, and I think that was a conversation we had. Do I use Z or S? Where's this book going? And I went, you know what? Yeah. I live in Australia, and we spell it with an S, and that's what's going to go out.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting. I mean, it's a really important question, because that then goes to who's your target audience, and you've got to remove yourself from that situation and think about who are your readers and what are they going to actually want? And yeah, there's a bit of a difference. So thank you for answering questions. Christina, thank you for your time and insights. We're going to wrap it up now. Christina, you've got an offer for people who are listening onto today's interview for your book?
I do indeed. I do. So the book does not have, I don't know if I'm meant to be sharing this, but it doesn't have a huge profit margin in it. But if you would like to buy the book, then we will do it postage free as an offer for people that are listening to this podcast. So.
Oh, that's great. And what I'd suggest for people, you might want to DM me or DM Christina, and we could make that happen for you. I highly recommend it, and even though I'm in it, I've learned a lot from it. And if you'd like to talk to Christina about speaking at an event or learning more about what she does, she's obviously on LinkedIn, and you can DM there here. And if you've been inspired to either write or self-publish your book, please contact me for a free strategy session. I've had some nice support here from Christina, and no, she wasn't paid for those advertisements. So yeah, please DM me or send me a note through LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help. Thanks again, everybody, for taking the time out of your afternoon. And Christina, thank you so much for your time. I mentioned to Christina when we first got online that I'm actually at Work Club in the city in Sydney, and I'm actually sitting in the room where Christina interviewed me for the book. So I thought that was kind of cute.
Nice circle.
Yeah, it's a very nice circle. So everybody, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your week, and look forward to staying connected on LinkedIn. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, Jaqui.
Pleasure.